right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Limitless MD. I'm your host, Vikram Raya, and today I have my good friend and resident badass, Dr. Jimmy Turner. He is known as the physician philosopher. Jimmy is a practicing academic anesthesiologist in Winston-Salem at Wake Forest, but he is known all over the country to physicians near and dear as the doctor that's helping people get out of burnout, get out of concern, get out of constraints, these golden handcuffs, and into what he calls the thrive state. So with that, welcome, Jimmy, to the podcast.
What if you could reclaim hours of free time each week, create legacy building wealth, and devote more energy to your passion projects without giving up on your career as a life-saving MD? My name is Vikram Raya, functional cardiologist, high performance coach, and real estate expert. And I'm here to give you the tools, strategies, and solutions you need to transform your life so you can unlock your limitless potential and achieve greatness, all the while freeing up your precious time. Welcome to Limitless MD. Let's dive in.
Thanks for having me on, Vikram. Couldn't be more excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me your origin story, Jimmy. Like, you became like a Dr. Messiah, like as soon as you finished residency, or was there like a process here? I mean, how did this happen?
Yeah. So I had the typical road that I think a lot of doctors have, up through undergrad and medical school and the rest of my training. And, interestingly enough, like I finished my training and, I had a lot of leadership positions the entire way. And in a lot of ways, I was kind of like the golden child. Right? I was student body president in med school. I was co-chief resident, published a bunch of papers my first year as an attending. And my fellowship year, I kind of got exposed to personal finance. And so I started reading the books, I started listening to the podcasts, and really started soaking that stuff up. And it was interesting to me that despite the content and the blogs and everything that were out there at the time, everyone I talked to at the place where I worked at Wake Forest, none of them knew anything about this stuff. And so I realized like, oh, there's still like the pie can still grow. And, now I know what that's called. It's a growth mindset. But back then I didn't know that. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to start a personal finance blog. And, the spin that I'm going to put on it is how financial independence relates to wellness or burnout in medicine. And at one point, the tagline on my site was, fighting burnout with financial independence. And as irony would have it, 2 years into my career, I would get burned out. And, some of it was just because of professional stuff. Some of it was because I couldn't control what time I got home. I'd miss t-ball games and gymnastics practice. And, I really just wouldn't, be there a lot of the time. And, I turned my wife into a single mother, which I had no interest in doing. And I really wanted to support her career, whatever that was going to look like for her. She's an educator and a substantially better human being, by the way. And so, I really wanted to be around. I wanted to be there for my wife. I wanted to be there for my 3 kids. And I just had no control over my schedule. I had no control what time I got home. And I had some professional opportunities pass me up. And so I started burning out pretty quickly. And I was working 1.2 FTE at this point, doing research, education. And I also had an online business on top of all of that. And so I started burning out and I did what other people, I taught other people to do, right? I started growing my business. I started creating some financial independence. I made it a multi-6-figure business. And lo and behold, despite having some financial freedom from my online business, it didn't save me from burnout. And in the midst of all of this, I actually ended up having a panic attack on a golf course, which for my baseline personality, in order to be an anesthesiologist, you kind of have to be cool, calm, and collected. Like a good anesthesiologist does not freak out when, the shit hits the fan. And so I realized, something was wrong. I had this massive panic attack, first one in my life. And I went and got diagnosed with Graves' disease. My TSH was like undetectable. And I was so burned out at the time that I was actually excited that I got diagnosed with Graves' disease because I was like, yes, there's finally an answer for why I feel the way that I feel. Until I got put on methimazole and I got euthyroid and my TSH was now detectable and it didn't fix my burnout. And so that's when I kind of fell into coaching and shifting my mindset around a lot of the things that had been happening in my life and on money and on time management and being there and finding work-life balance. And so after that was so helpful for me, I stepped into coaching myself. And now I love teaching doctors how to create the time, financial freedom, and kind of that balance that they need to practice medicine on their terms. And that's what I love to do because that's the journey that I walked myself.
That's awesome, man. and the story about the thyroid, you're like, yes, I have a diagnosis, but you're like, after that was resolved, you're like, oh, there's still the underlying problem underneath that. So
Yep.
that's interesting.
Yeah, it was. I was on
So,
the hole number two, and I was playing with my buddy Mike, and I literally my panic attack was so bad, I like shotgunned a beer like right after. I was like, I just need something to calm me down. It was like horrifically bad. I feel for people that have panic attacks.
and when you said I made my wife a single mom, that like I felt some goosebumps there, because when I've been on my journey of trying to build my real estate, my practice, coaching, everything else I'm trying to do, I sometimes there's some collateral damage, and one of that was I felt like my wife took on more of the burden to take care of, I mean, not the burden, but the responsibility to take on the children. And I don't want that. I want to be there as well. Like, and so help me understand, like, you wrote this book, Determined, guys. You need to go pick it up. It's going to be on Amazon. It's going to be on Audible. It's going to be everywhere. And it's really Jimmy walking people through a framework from burnout to what he calls the thrive state. But talk to me about what made you write this book.
Yeah, so I think that if I have a superpower, it is making complicated things simple for other people. And so I break most things down in my life into frameworks. And people spend a lot of time talking about like, what does burnout look like? And I have to mention this on every show that I ever talk about burnout, because there's gonna be people listening that are like, burnout's not the right word, it's moral injury. And there's that whole debate out there. And I actually have an entire section of my book about what I think about that. But ultimately, medicine's broken, right? The subtitle of my book talks about how doctors can thrive in a broken medical system. And the reason why is because we need to acknowledge that medicine is very broken. And so what that systematic brokenness causes is moral injury, and then the individual phenomenon of burnout for individual doctors. And so it's a both and. It's called a false dichotomy in philosophy, when someone says, no, it's either or. And for me, moral injury exists, and the individual phenomenon experienced by doctors is burnout. It's a both and. And so everybody talks about the three tenets of burnout. They talk about the emotional exhaustion and the lack of accomplishments and depersonalization, but very few people spend time talking about, okay, if that's the problem, what is the opposite of this? What does it look like when a doctor thrives? What does a doctor have to have in order to be fully engaged, to love what they do, to be intrinsically motivated, to have work-life balance, everything that we really want in a job? And it turns out that there's two researchers, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, that over 30 years ago started this research on what's called self-determination theory. And hilarious as medicine is, right? Like we always do it the way we've always done it. And there's all this research outside of medicine that everyone ignores. But these guys basically put together this theory that had three components to it. And to basically fulfill what I just said a second ago about intrinsic motivation and loving what you do. The first one's autonomy, right? And I break these three things into five subcomponents, but autonomy. So you need to have personal autonomy, meaning that you need to be able to control your schedule, what time you get home, how much you work, when you work. You need to have professional autonomy. How do you do your job? Like, do you have to constantly do pre-authorizations and deal with insurance companies and electronic medical records you hate? Are bureaucrats and administrators controlling your job? You trained really hard and you don't like being micromanaged, right? So that's personal and professional autonomy. The second piece is called relatedness in psychological literature. I think that's a dumb term. It doesn't mean anything to me. So I call it belonging. And what that means is that you have to feel like when you raise a concern that you're a valued member of the team, that your voice matters, that when you speak up, changes are made, and that you are someone that the leaders leading you genuinely care about. You also need to be attached to a deeper purpose. And in other words, the team, you need to be accomplishing something like that. The name on the back of the jersey isn't as important as the name on the front, right? Like you need to be able to say that, hey, I'm accomplishing something bigger than myself. And lastly, you need to have confidence. You need to be good at what you do. And more importantly, you need to think that you're good at what you do. So it's more about perceived confidence. And when you miss that, it's called imposter syndrome, by the way. And so it's ABC, right? The ABCs of self-determination. That's autonomy, belonging, and competence. And it turns out that when you have those things, you will thrive. And when you're missing them, when you're missing the autonomy, you will have emotional exhaustion or apathy. When you're missing the belonging piece, right, you're going to have depersonalization and treat patients and colleagues, a little bit like they're inanimate objects that, you compartmentalize them. And when bad things happen, you say, well, that's just what happens in medicine. And when you don't feel like you're good at what you do, you feel like you haven't made many accomplishments, right? They're mirror opposites of each other. one describing what happens when you're burned out and the other one that describes what happens when you thrive and what you need to do that. And so that framework can help people figure out, okay, these are the 5 things. Like, I feel like I'm attached to deeper purpose. I take good care of patients. I feel like I'm pretty good at what I do. But what I'm missing is those 2 pieces of autonomy and feeling valued at my job. Okay, well, now you know what you need to work on, right? You need to create autonomy in your life and you need to find a way to feel valued, whether that's at work or somewhere else.
What I love what you're sharing, Jimmy, is not only it's a framework, but it's also a solution, right? The framework provides the solution. And let me dig into something that you just talked about at the beginning. You sought out coaching. Now, physician coaching is sort of a relatively new concept. Is it because doctors are damaged? That's why they need coaching? Is it therapy? What is coaching to you? And why do you think that it's starting to become more popular but there's still a stigma about it?
Yeah. So coaching's existed in the executive world for a very long time, right? It's slowly crept into medicine. But it hasn't, like, the executives in medicine, they get coached, right? So like the business world is used to this concept. And I think it's a really important question. So I'll answer that, in terms of therapy versus coaching. And the way that I like to, explain this is from experience. So I've struggled with depression. I'm on antidepressants right now. I've struggled with anxiety, right? And so part of me mentioning those things publicly is to destigmatize mental health. Like, I have no problem talking about it. And that said, the therapy that I've gotten from a psychiatrist is extremely different than coaching. And so psychiatry, in my experience, really focuses on, hey, you've got this issue. Let's talk about what went on in your life that led to this issue that you're currently having, right? So it's kind of past focused. And then coaching says, okay, this is where you are. Great. I'm glad that you understand how you got here. You can't fix the past. Let's focus on the future and move forward. And so in my opinion, they're complementary, right? Your coaching's not going to work if your neurotransmitters aren't right. And at the same time, your neurotransmitters can be right, but if you don't leave the past in the past and don't let it control your future, you can't move forward, right? So they are complementary in my mind. And I think that the reason that this has been so slow to creep into medicine is because we literally say these things out loud in medicine, right? Like, asking for help is weak, right? We say, hey, like, you can call me whenever you want, but just know that calling's a sign of weakness, right? And so, like, we like actually say these things out loud. And so there's this idea that when a doctor who is by nature perfectionist, by nature doesn't like to fail, by nature doesn't like asking for help, and we have this idea that we got there on our own, which, by the way, is not true. None of us got to where we are alone, right? There are people along your journey that help prop you up and get you to where you are. But we have this feeling that we are the captain of the ship. We're supposed to be in control. And, kind of reminds me of the song by Eminem is Toy Soldier. Like you can't admit that you have all this weight on your shoulder. Like, you're not allowed to do that as a doctor. And so coaching, in a way, is an admission that you need help. And for doctors, that is a really hard thing to do.
That's right. That's right. I've had years and years of coaching, and it's helped me really, sort of rediscover myself, get aligned, get my identity towards expansive versus being caged, and sort of opens up possibilities of, my highest and best self. So I can just go forward without the baggage of the past and sort of dealing with it. Now, if it's enough, like if it's PTSD, if it's true burnout, or if it's other more severe things, then I really believe like a psychologist or something may help you mitigate your past belief system. So then the coaching can allow you to propel forward. But I love how you had that nice little linear description of that past focus, which is therapy, and future focus, which is coaching.
Yep.
That's awesome. So all the doctors you work with in coaching, what do you think is it all burnout, or is there other things that are holding doctors back? Because burnout's a strong word, or moral injuries is a strong word. And people say, I don't have that, so I don't need coaching. But what else do people struggle with that you guys do in your coaching program?
Yeah. So the 2 things that people come into ACE for, right? It's the Alpha Coaching Experience. So ACE is they're burned out, obviously. The second thing is they're trying to make a transition of some kind. So in a lot of ways, it's career coaching. And what I mean by that is they're thinking about taking a new job. Maybe they're looking to take their first job. Maybe they're thinking about going part-time or starting a side gig or going into non-clinical stuff like biotech or pharma. They want to take a leap into something, but they don't know exactly how to do it. And they don't know how to have the confidence to know that they're making the right decision. and to also know that if they make the wrong decision, that they can tolerate it. Right. So people come in when they're in this transitionary phase, and this happens all the time. I actually had someone email me. So I obviously love coaching on money. One of the other things I love coaching on is negotiation, right? Because if you want to have the life that you want to have, you have to learn how to negotiate. I don't care if you're like a brick and mortar W-2 employee, you have to know how to negotiate. And so I love coaching people on this. And I actually got an email like in the last week, and someone's like, hey, I just wanted to circle back. Like, they were in ACE for like, I don't know, 15 months. And he's like, hey, so I actually ended up negotiating with my bosses, the way that you taught me how to, and kind of pointed out some things that you mentioned that, maybe they should consider in order to shift their perspective, right? Which he learned in coaching. And he ended up getting like a $293,000 raise. And so
Wow.
people are like, it's so
Nice.
funny to me. They're like, oh man, coaching costs, $5, $10, $15,000. Like, I can't spend that money because, I'm not sure I'm gonna get the return on investment. And I just laugh. And I know you laugh too, because we've seen the growth that happens when people
Oh,
get
yeah.
coaching. And so for me, like I can come up with example after example after example of people really creating a life that they love through coaching and through the framework we teach and through, kind of that curriculum that we have inside ACE.
Yeah, like for a 4 or 5 figure investment, your ROI could be 6, 7, 8 figure return. So it's a no-brainer. But forget just the monetary, just your self-confidence, your energy, you're in flow state. You're surrounded by your environment, your standards are completely raised, and the kind of camaraderie you get, and you're around people who when you tell them your ideas, they don't laugh. They're like, all right, how do you want to do it?
Yeah, I think that the community aspect of things is one of the most important, because people don't realize that when you're surrounded by people that constantly tell you like there's nothing better, there's nothing else out there, there's no opportunity, or they say, oh, you're just a doctor, you could never be an entrepreneur, or you couldn't be successful at this or that. When you surround yourself by people that have that scarcity mindset, it just seems like a fact. And when you surround yourself by people that are not limited by that, like, I love the name of your podcast, right? They're limitless. You will find that by surrounding yourself by those people, you will come up with new ideas. You will not fear failure. You will be able to press forward even when things are hard. And you will actually be able to kind of lift yourself to new heights that you didn't even know existed, just by surrounding yourself by people that think differently. And I don't think that doctors realize how important that is. Like I forget who it is, but the person that said, you are the average of the 6 people you hang around with the most. If you hang around with a bunch of people that think that things are never going to get better, and this is, your lot in life, and you're stuck with your student loans and you're non-compete and there's nothing you can do about it, you're going to think that that's true. Right. And
Right.
so
And you talked about fixed and growth mindset. There it is right there.
yeah.
What's on your nightstand right now? What are you reading?
Ooh, good question. So I actually read like a ridiculous amount of self-help books. And so because of that, I was like, I need to take a break from this right now. I just want to read something for pleasure. So I like, I don't know, epic fantasy or like, dystopian novels. So I just read one called Sith. I'm actually on the last book.
Okay.
And it's a super interesting book. But yeah, I actually have taken a little bit of a break. Before that, on audiobook, I was listening to The Untethered Soul, which
Okay.
was,
That's
yeah,
a big one. Singer.
yeah.
Michael
So
Singer.
yeah, super interesting book. I'm about a third of the way through that when I'm
That's a
driving
deep
my
one
truck.
though.
Oh yeah, so that's why that's why I'm a third of the way through it. I'm like,
Yeah.
I need to take a break for a little bit. And I was a philosophy major, so I normally love that stuff.
Right. That's awesome, man. Okay, cool. Number one, how can people learn about all the things you're doing? I know, what's the best place for them what's your hub if they want to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think the best way, because this is a podcast that you're listening to this on, is to go to the Physician Philosopher podcast. And actually,
Okay.
I would highly encourage you to check out Vikram's episode, because Vikram just came on that show, and I've already heard from several people that it's a great episode to listen to. Because as everyone on this podcast knows, Vikram drops knowledge bombs like they're falling out of the sky, and so that show is just full of golden nuggets. So you should check that out, and you can go to thephysicianphilosopher.com. And obviously check out Determined, the book.
Okay, guys, go right now. While you're listening to this, go to Audible, go to Amazon. And guys, for the Audible listeners, it's not some random person who's going to be narrating the story. It's yours truly, Jimmy Turner, with his sexy, deep voice, narrating you Determined: How burnt out doctors can thrive in a broken medical system. And if you really want to get out of this burnout or apathy or sort of neutral state, and you may not be burnout, but you're definitely not thrive state. You need to learn these frameworks and then start applying them so that you can truly be in thrive state, be the best, dad or mom you can be the, alpha in your clinical practice, and then start scaling and really love and pursue your passions outside of medicine, because we want that for you as well. It's not just, it's all and. It's not the false dichotomy as Jim was mentioning. It's you don't have to make these tough choices. You can have it all.
Yeah. And, I remember that quote you said on my podcast, right? You're not a period, you're a comma. And, right. And that is kind of the point, right? You gotta live a life you love. Life's way too short to not be living a life you love. And for me, like, I love practicing anesthesia. I'm always going to want it to be a part of my life, but it's pretty far down the priority list when I start writing things down. And so, yeah, I want my marriage with my wife to be the top priority. I want my kids to be a close second, and then like maybe works a third or fourth, right? I don't know. But at the end of the day, like, you should be able to enjoy all of those things. You shouldn't have to choose between being a great spouse, a great parent, and a great physician. You should be able to do all three.
So what's next for the famous Jimmy Turner?
Yeah, it's I've got and now granted this is going to be recorded after the fact, but I've got a coaching program coming up, and so I'm super excited about that. And we're kind of revamped it. It's like ACE 2.0, and so we're making it 6 months long, and we're going to kind of go through the book for some of the discussion groups and then the coaching that exists there. So I'm really, really excited about that.
And they can find out about the coaching when they go to your podcast website, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fantastic, guys. Well, there you have it. CEO and founder of the physician philosopher, Dr. Jimmy Turner, practicing academic anesthesiologist, author, second-time author. He has one book out. His second book is called Determined. And on top of that, he shared with us the beautiful framework of what it takes to go to burnout, and then how do you reverse engineer and create a thrive state. Family man, doctor, entrepreneur, good friend of mine. I love having this guy. He'll definitely have to be a repeat guest. So guys, check out his website, and thanks for the reviews. Thanks for the momentum on our podcast. And until next time, be phenomenal.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Limitless MD. If you found value from this episode, I encourage you to share this episode with a friend and let me know by leaving a review. For more information, make sure you check out the links in the show notes below, or simply visit vikramraya.com. So until next time, my friends, be phenomenal.